In this video, we'll look at how can we use a graphical display to describe the relationship between two variables. In the previous lecture, we talked about the cross-tabulation, and we emphasized the multifunction of the cross-tabulation. So we created a table with the two variables, and we can know a lot of information which will show up the relationship between the two variables. In most cases, a graphical display is more useful than a table for recognizing pattern and a trend. Display data in creative way can lead to powerful insights. You can think about if you are watching the night news. If the people showing at the table, you are trying to figure out the data. However, if he's showing you a line, you can very easily recognize what are they talking about. So the scatter diagram and with the trend line are useful in exploring the relationship between two variables. So what is a scatter diagram? A scatter diagram is the graphical presentation of relationship between two quantitative variables. Do you remember when we talk about the tabulation what we said? So that's a relationship between two categorical variables, or one categorical, one quantitative, or two quantitative variables. So you can see the tabulation looks more able than the scatter diagram. So make sure we are learning different tools, you know the advantage and disadvantage and difference among different methods. So one variable is shown on the horizontal axis and the other variable is shown on the vertical axis. So now you want to ask me, what do we expect to say on this diagram, and how can we judge the relationship based on the pattern of the diagram? So we will talk about it in the following slides. The general pattern of the plotted points suggests the overall relationship between the variables. A trend line provides an approximately of the relationship. So scatters is the fact. The trend line is the tendency. Because we are not like computer, we can understand the data pretty well. So sometimes the computer will help us to simulate the trend line in order to help us to find the relationship between two variables. So let's look at a few examples. So how about the positive relationship looks like? So this diagram showing us a positive relationship. So the blue dot on the diagram is the scatters. So the dashed red line is the trend line. So when you look at this line, what do you remember? Did you remind you something in economics class? Yes, this is the supply curve. So in the supply curve, the horizontal axis is the quantity, and the vertical axis y is the price, which telling us when the price increase and the production will increase as well. So they have the positive relationship. So when the market price goes down, it will frustrate the producer's motivation, so the production will decrease as well. So when X increase, Y will increase. When X decrease, Y will decrease. So this kind of relationship is called a positive relationship. How about negative relationship? So if we get the scatter plot, we will find that the scatter plot have going downward. So what does this diagram remind you in economics class? Yes, it's a demand curve. So as the price goes up, the demand goes down. As price goes down, demand goes up. So they always change it in the opposite direction. So we call this kind of relationship as negative relationship. So if you, since you've already learned some basic math, geometry, so you should know the slope of this trend line should be negative, and so it's also called negative relationship. So can you build up the bridge between these two definitions, negative relationship and a negative slope? And the no apparent relationship. So sometimes X and Y shouldn't have any relationship, or the data set didn't reflect any relationship. So how can we decide the no apparent relationship based on the scatter plot? Here is the example. So we have the scatter. So we cannot see any go going up or going down trend, but just a really horizontal line. So in that scenario, the trend line is a horizontal line, and we call it no apparent relationship. So you can think many things. So for instance, what are you eating at breakfast? The relationship between what do you eat as breakfast with the GPA. I think they shouldn't have any relationship, because I know many people, they don't eat, they can get a good grade, and I know many people eat a heavy breakfast, they have a good grade. So obviously these two shouldn't have any no apparent relationship. So in the next video, you should watch a video about how to create the scatter plot with a trend line on D2L.